For the Interrobank, I'm Gracia Espinosa, and welcome to a new episode of the Red Couch Podcast Summer Edition. Two special guests, Natalie Fletcher, Indigenous Student Success Manager, and Belinda Sayeau, Indigenous Transitions and Learning Advisor. Welcome. It's the first time in our podcast?
It is.
Yeah? Well, don't feel afraid because relax. This is, the moment to talk, to think.
Awesome.
We only want to have a normal conversation.
Awesome. We're good at talking, so.
So obviously my first question is, can you each share a bit about how you became involved in the Institute of Indigenous Learning here in Fanshawe? To know your background, now introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, I got hired, so that's how I got involved. But my name is Natalie Fletcher from Caldwell First Nation, which is in Leamington. I've been here for about 5 years. Actually, a graduate of Fanshawe College as well. So I've known the campus and Fanshawe for a number of years. And prior to coming here, I actually worked for First Nation community. And I was a counselor for students, Indigenous students that were attending. So I've been around Fanshawe for a number of years. And when the manager position came up, I applied for it and I was very excited to have the opportunity to come and work at Fanshawe.
Thanks, Natalie.
Now you have to impress.
So much more than that, though. But yes, my name is Belinda Sayeau, Mananaquay Indigenous Cause, Sayeau and Natalie. My spirit name is Berry Woman. I actually had a nice little strawberry pin made yesterday for me from somebody from the Library Learning Commons. But and then my endodum is Diving Hawk, so I'm Diving Hawk Clan. I am not from London. I came to Fanshawe to work actually in 2007. Then I actually went to school, took the business co-op program. And after that, as soon as I graduated, I started working in the First Nation Center, which is the former name of the Institute of Indigenous Learning. And I worked for about a year and a half in that capacity before I went to financial aid for 11 years. And then I came back to the Institute. Hard to believe, it was 3 years ago, and I love it. I love my job. I actually am part of this pin, which I think is notable. It says Auntie B, it's the real deal. And a lot of the students do look at me kind of like an auntie. It's pretty awesome, because it's more than just being an Indigenous Transition and Learning Advisor. So, pretty awesome.
I'm curious, your communities, it's okay if I say you're in hometown. I don't know if it is close, it's far away from both of you. I would like to know more about, your hometown, your nation,
My
your First Nation,
Yeah, my First Nation is Shoal Lake 40, Ishkutay Sagegon in northwestern Ontario. It actually borders on Manitoba. And that's my mother's nation. My father's from Ikasay Sagegon, which is Eagle Lake First Nation, which is kind of closer to Dryden. And I grew up in a town called Red Lake, which is actually about 200 kilometers north of that. So my experience actually is because I'm growing up in the north, but also being a 60 scoop survivor, that makes a real difference, I think, in the way, of course, that I approach my role, the way that I kind of live my life. But I really like living in London and working for Natalie at Fanshawe College.
She has to say that because I'm her boss, so. My community is Caldwell First Nation. It's in Leamington. Point Pelee National Park is actually our traditional land. So it's a very lovely, beautiful area. My mother is from Caldwell First Nation. My father is actually immigrant. He's from the Netherlands. So I'm a nice, beautiful blended family. And it is our nation has a really interesting history. We're one of the few nations that were without a land base. So we don't have a reserve community. So we were displaced during the War of 1812. And right now our community is working on creating a community right within Leamington. But I would say that most of our members live there. My mother grew up there. That's where she met my father. So.
Oh, that's so, it's so interesting because, for example, in my country, Spain, I have never met someone indigenous or from other, from a First Nation. So for me, it's super interesting to talk with you. And obviously, I would like to know what are some common goals as educators do you have in supporting Indigenous students of Fanshawe College?
So I think one of our goals is we want all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students to feel that they belong here, that when they come to Fanshawe, they're going to be successful, they're going to find a space where they can be themselves. And our goal really is to get them here and to graduate them and see them go do really, really cool things. Belinda has a really cool job in that she gets to really help those students transition here, and she has this really amazing ability to connect with students. And Belinda's communities from the north, but she just seems to know everyone. Like, she's able to talk to someone and say, "Oh, I know your uncle," or "I used to babysit you when you were little." Like, she always has these amazing stories, but I'll let her describe her role here.
Hey, that's so good.
It's true, and I think it is actually quite interesting because it happens quite a bit. Like, even just a few weeks ago, this gentleman came in and he wanted to come to school, wants his son to come to school. And he tells me, he goes, "Well, I was a hard rock miner for years." And I said, "A hard rock miner? Like any? Do you ever hear of Red Lake? Because there's a big gold mine in my hometown." He said, "Yeah, I used to work there." So then it turns out he knows people I know. And it just, again, just one of those things. I think making those connections is especially important with our people because, especially in a place like Fanshawe College, and I always say, we have these students, but they're not just a number, as I think perhaps, that has been the case with other demographics in the college. I know these students and I care about them. I care about their families. I care about what they're going to do while they're here. I care about them enough to oftentimes when they come in, I'll make small talk or offer them food, make sure they've had something to eat. But there's a big world out there, and there's a big world out there where we don't see Indigenous people in higher up roles here at Fanshawe College. We don't see any Indigenous vice presidents at Fanshawe. I think the President Western, or at least used to be, I think was from India. And so I think we have a lot of work to do, and I love to be a part of it, but I also have, I've experienced firsthand some of those hardships and difficulties.
Obviously, with all your experience, I would like to know the key challenges Indigenous students face as students of Fanshawe College, and how do you address them?
Oh, thank you. Sweaty palms on this thing again. Okay, sorry, that's what she said. That is funny. So I just think though, okay, so if you took a student who grew up and went to, I don't know what the school is called down the street, St. John Paul or whatever it is, and then you take a student who grew up on the res, whose grandparent might have been in a residential school and really had no great basis of education, and maybe their parent doesn't even have high school, and then they went to a school on the res that doesn't even meet the same equal levels of education that a school in the city does. And then they come here to Fanshawe, and not much wonder maybe they're lacking in writing skills or basic literacy, things like that. Maybe reading is not anything anyone in their family did. And so I think that's an important part of looking at what we're trying to do. We're not starting at a level playing field oftentimes, and many people have a perception, especially if they come from, sometimes I had an international student say, "Well, don't you get everything for free?" But there's also something behind that. There are treaties that existed nation to nation when the colonization and contact was first made, and that is forgotten and it's not taught. And I think that's an important part to understand about the work that we're trying to do.
I don't know if you want to add something, Natalie, or...
She did a really wonderful job with that. I'm good.
No, because it's super important to know this, because obviously June is not only the Pride Month, it's the National Indigenous History Month in Canada. So from your perspective, why it's so important to recognize and celebrate the Indigenous history? Do you think that we still don't know all the knowledge and all your history?
Yeah, I think it's really important because number one, we're awesome and we need to celebrate ourselves and be celebrated, right? Because we have always been here, and when settlers came over, we helped them survive. Like, our ancestors helped them survive in a world that they weren't prepared for. And really the thanks was colonization, government policy that dictated what Indigenous people can and can't do within Canada. So we lost our languages. Residential schools were part of that policy that happened. So the culture, the language, we're gone. And so what's really great is that we're such resilient people. Like, our languages are coming back. Fanshawe actually has 2 Indigenous language programs, Oneida and Anishinaabe-Moan. So it's really amazing that we're able to come to a place like Fanshawe and learn our language. I struggle with that a little bit because I don't think it's up to Fanshawe for our people to learn their language, but I'm happy that they have a place to do that. But I think, you know, the history, when you look at it, it's not great, but we are doing such wonderful things. Like, we are amazing. And I'll say that a million times. And I use my mom as an example all the time. She had a horrible experience in school, and she is the kindest, happiest person I have ever known my entire life. And I think, you know, we have so many great artists and musicians and politicians. Like, we're just making such huge strides and being more prevalent and noticed and recognized for some of the things that we're doing. So we need to celebrate those. And at the same end, I'm kind of disappointed that, you know, sometimes we still are saying in 2024, this is the first Indigenous woman to do this, or this is the first Indigenous man to, like, speak his language in Parliament.
And perhaps it was not the first person. Perhaps in the past, long time ago, there was another Indigenous woman, another Indigenous man that we don't know that they did that.
Yeah, it's possible, but we shouldn't have to be saying the first in
of
2024.
course.
So I think, you know, there's things to look forward to and to strive towards, but it's a good month for us, right? It's a beautiful month. The summer is starting. We get to do all that cool, like, berry picking and things. So there's a lot to celebrate this month. I think celebrating who we are as Indigenous people, but also celebrating who we are as Indigenous people here at Fanshawe College is really cool.
Belinda, I wanted to ask you, because I know you are professor here in Fanshawe College, so I don't know, in your classes you teach about, or no?
I'm not a teacher.
Oh, I understood the last time that I met you. I mean, when we were in the...
talked to a class.
Okay,
yes.
you talk in a class,
and
okay.
I think possibly at some point that would be something I definitely could do, because I think I enjoy it. But there's a certain part, there's a reason, and I think that's the part. You know, yes, we're celebrating, but there's reasons for this, and sometimes those reasons are the thing that I'm astounded by. And going back to what Natalie said about the, you know, an Indigenous member of provincial parliament was just speaking his own Indigenous language, which is Anishinaabe, which is very close to the language both of my parents spoke, just last week in the provincial legislature. But the part of it that I want to note is he was punished for it before. And there was another gentleman, I think, from another place up north who did it once before, and he also was punished. And so there's this part of it, of me, that, you know, I see both sides, and I think that's important to note, because it is, you know, while we're celebrating, there's reasons we're celebrating. And there's such a loss in my own personal life that I do approach it maybe somewhat differently. I think a lot of us as Indigenous people, that's just part of the nature of sometimes being Indigenous. So sorry, what did you ask?
No,
teaching.
teaching, because I noticed that in general we don't have enough information about the history, your customs, your culture. So obviously, I have to ask if, because of that, we have stereotypes about the
Yes.
First Nations.
Yes, and I think sometimes because of the questions I'm asked in those classes, you know, there's a professor in the School of Language and Liberal Studies, Mohammed Sharifi, and he's a communications professor, and he's got a great interest in Indigenous culture and our ways of being and ways of knowing. And so he's asked me to speak with his classes. And sometimes the questions I'm asked make me think, yes, we do need a class to introduce, you know, possibly these people have never encountered an Indigenous person, and they come here and they hear these things, you know, or they find out, okay, the status card, what is a status card for? You know, there's a great film series that the National Film Board is putting on for this month. And I was listening to the trailer this morning, and this woman's name was Mary Early, and she had lost her status because of this very sexist law in Canada that existed for many years, where if a Native woman, an Indigenous woman, married a white man, she would lose her Indigenous status, and her children would lose their status. And I have relatives like this.
It's not only the last name; it's all.
It is the sex of being the Native woman. And then if a non-Indigenous woman married a Native man, her and all her children would gain status. And so there's all these little things, and I think, oh my goodness, this should be a course, for people, even newcomers, but even treaty education in general should be taught in Canada. We are still here, and our treaties are still, important and should be enacted.
I'm curious. It will be the same for the indigenous man if in this case is going to get married with a white woman or a white
He
person.
didn't
No?
lose his status
Wow.
in those situations. She would get it. Yeah, so it's completely, again, these things aren't taught to people. The Indian Act of so many things that make that up, and we are bound by them. Our reserve system, our whole governance system, we are bound by that racist, very horrific government legislation. But yet, if we don't have that, what else do we have? So again, there's so much work to do, and I know this is, we are such amazing people, but we are resilient, and we're coming out of a dark time. And to me, I think, I feel like I really am I have to have my voice because my ancestors didn't have that. My mother certainly didn't have that kind of voice. So I try to use that, but I also try to be as kind as I can.
So, with this important thought, I would like to know the most effective way to support the indigenous community. I mean, to know your story, to know about you, your roots. What will be?
Well, I think, for example, Gracia, you are an excellent ally and a friend, and Nietzsche in my language is our word for friend. And I would say to see you and Cami and Cesar the other day after that, because it can be emotionally exhausting speaking to people and sometimes sharing very, very personal, intimate knowledge about my past and my family's past. And to see you in our Institute of Indigenous Learning when I came back from that class, and to have lunch with you and laugh and hug, that is important. So please keep that up.
Yeah. But I think not enough students know about this initiative that if you could explain about, because perhaps there are people who not afraid, but they are shy and they don't go to the Indigenous Learning Center, that I always try to share with other students and other colleagues here that, hey, do you want to come with me to the Indigenous Learning Center? We are going to eat something special that Belinda prepared. So if you could share with all of us about this initiative, why it's...
I think, but there's more to it because there's other community things as well. London is a very big place. We're surrounded at least by, within an hour's drive of 8 different First Nations, 3 just outside our city. And so I believe there's a powwow at Chippewa of the Thames this Friday. And then on the June 21st, there's a big powwow right in the city. It's called Gathering on the Green. And that takes place in Wortley Village by the old normal school, I think it was called. But it's an all-day event. And part of, I think, of what we should be encouraging is, part of that, if you don't know something, well, you're not ever going to know if you don't ever engage yourself with that. And I think it's, there are many events within our community that perhaps we might have to look outside the scope a little bit, but we have a great event here at Fanshawe. Every March we have our own powwow. And I always invite, international students who may never have been to a powwow, may not know any Indigenous people, please come to our event because that's what we need. We need that too, because we're not an island unto ourselves. We live like that long enough. And I think now it's time that we do celebrate everything with others as well.
Mm-hmm. So you invite the Indigenous, obviously, international students who are not Indigenous and they want to know more about your story, your root, but at the same time, you invite the Indigenous students to come because, for example, one of the activities that you are going to organize is the summer kickoff, if I am not right. So could you explain about this and why you decided to do it? Because I think it's something that I would like to introduce for the international students, because many of us, we are not Canadian, we have never been in North America, so it will be great to, before your program, to know more about London, about Toronto. But in case for the Indigenous students, what did you prepare? What have you prepared?
Yeah, summer is always a really busy time for us. So our summer kickoff is our second year doing this.
Oh.
We invite Indigenous students that are coming to Fanshawe that have confirmed their offer, and they're just graduating high school, so from the ages of 17 to 21 or 22. So we invite them for a weekend here, so they get to see Fanshawe when it's not super busy, so they can navigate and see some of the services and areas in the college. We put them up in residence, so they get to stay in residence for us, so they get that experience, so they can see what staying in residence might be like. They get to meet other Indigenous students as well. And this year we're taking them to a Blue Jays game, so we're going to do some fun stuff because we want their first time coming to Fanshawe to be fun, but also get to meet us as staff, so they know, like, if things aren't going well, you can come and see us. We're cool, like we're here for you. So we're really big on that. So we're spending a weekend with our high school graduates. I think we have 45 students attending. Yeah, it'll be fairly large. And then we have summer college program, which starts in July. And what that is basically students come to us for 6 weeks. They'll take a course. So we're going to show them how, like, FOL works. We'll get them an intro to a college course. Also stay in residence, but then we do cool stuff around the city, so they know how to use the bus. So we'll get on the bus with them. We'll take them. I think we're going to Rock the Park, actually. So they're going to go to Rock the Park as well. So we just want them to get involved in the London community as well. So, and we do have students that attend that event that are coming to us from northern communities as well. So it's a really big deal. And part of it is strategic in that we want them to get a course out of the way so they can lessen their course load, and so their first semester won't be as difficult for them. But also, we really want them to connect with Fanshawe, our department, but also every other department as well.
Natalie and Belinda, both, you go to the summer kickoff, right?
Yes.
Other of your colleagues will go, or how many people from the Indigenous Learning Center will?
So
be there?
Belinda and I will be there. Rochelle and Victoria, who are recruiters. And I think FSU is joining us. We have 2 members of Fanshawe Student Union joining us as well. And I think a couple community members. So members from our First Nations communities as well. So yeah, it's a big relationship building activity that we're doing, and we also get to watch the Blue Jays.
My first time.
Obviously, this is one of the events that Fanshawe has to add more value to the Indigenous students. But I would like to know if public education institutions could do more for the Indigenous and in general for the First Nation.
I would say, yeah, for sure. And I think that could be started with the staffing of Indigenous people at Fanshawe College. I always say, we are not even, I don't even think 1% at Fanshawe College. And so again, I'm not trying to, be Debbie Downer, but certainly there's work to be done. Why is it that there are people who are not Indigenous that are teaching our courses and teaching students about the things that are about us? That should be us. We should have a voice at that table of curriculum, and there's so many other things that factor in a big institution like this. We have great partnerships with Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which is actually maybe even more because of being almost like that connection of having a way of having that previous connection, where I kind of feel that with one of the staff members who I work kind of closely with. But, what if that wasn't there? Right? There's all these things where it's like, yes, things are really wonderful, but there's so much work to be done, I think. Our students should be, I'll say it, like when I was in college, I won a provincial award that I don't think any student has won before or since at Fanshawe College. And that was the Colleges Ontario Student Excellence Award. And I think, we should have more students winning those awards. We should be celebrating. And again, and I say this because even a little celebration of one, it's like the mustard seed, You see one person come in, and I think of Mikey Dox-Tater, just one of the most genuinely caring and kind individuals that I've ever met, and to see him come out of his shell, be successful in his programs, and he was the recipient of the Logan Stats Media Award this past term. To see that is one of the most gratifying things about my job. And to see other things, seeing our students graduate. I'll be able to see a couple of them that are in the DSW program that will be crossing the stage, at a ceremony in a couple of weeks. And so that's just, that's the most gratifying thing I feel in my role.
And Natalie, for you, another memorable moment that you experienced here in function in general with the Indigenous students, or
Oh, there's honestly so many, and I think one of them is on graduation. Just watching all these students cross that number one didn't think they would get there, right? And honestly, government policy should have prevented them all from being there, but we're here, so that's great. I think what I really do love though is just the sense of community that we have, and I'll even use last week when you were in our center, and Cami, and we had London City Police, one of our liaisons, Chris Henry, was there, and we were just eating and laughing so much.
oh,
Like that's great, because sometimes my job doesn't feel like a job because we're having such a great time, right?
well, we can share the embarrassed moment that I had. I went to the Indigenous Learning Center, and we had one of the officers in front of us because he came, and I wanted, to be nice. I introduced myself, and the first thing that I thought it would be a good idea, it was, "Hi, I am from Spain." So in that moment, people were like, "We are not going to arrest it. I mean, I know you are legal here, so."
I think she said, "I'm from Spain and I have all my papers." Yeah.
But I appreciate that it's one of your memorable moments in the Indigenous Center. Yeah.
Yes.
But it was funny because after that no worries. I'm not going. Yeah, I'm not here because of you. I'm here because I want to lunch to eat and share.
Yeah, they came for the food.
Yeah.
But I think that's the great part about the job that we're in is we get to hang out.
Yeah.
I mean, we're working,
Yeah.
but
We get to know people on that
Yeah.
different level.
yeah,
so,
it is. It's a really about relationship building and creating that rapport with students, not just students, our own students, but also other faculty, staff within the college, other students, right? We're a fun place to be, and we do encourage students to stop in. If you have questions, ask, right? You won't learn unless you ask, and we're willing to answer those questions.
My last question, because we have to finish this incredible interview. What advice would you give Indigenous students facing challenge pursuing their educational goals?
Call me. Again, and I say that honestly, and I give my business card out to a lot of people, but I truly say that. I came back to Fanshawe having gone to Confederation College in Thunder Bay the first time, failed, went for 2 years, and didn't graduate. But I came back to Fanshawe at 35 and got a lot of support from what was the First Nation Center at that time, and I succeeded, and I was able to get a job here, which has grown into several different positions over the years. And so I do say, if we can help, please let us work with you, and I say that even, as because you never know who you might affect, we never know, like we have that Indigenous SWAC program at Fanshawe, the school within a college. We're the only college in the province that has an Indigenous stream of this program. And I think that's something, there's so much little seeds that could be germinated through some of the work that we do. And that's really important because we could be affecting a lot of successful lives in the future.
Your advice?
My
or-
advice is the same, really, as Belinda, is ask. Don't be afraid to ask. And I say that as a student who is always afraid to ask. But I think we're so accessible now. I think that there's so many services here that can help you. There really isn't a reason why you shouldn't be successful here, right? We're all here. We all want their success in the end, right? And just don't be afraid to ask. We're pretty nice.
Yeah, they are very nice. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you so much, Belinda. And of course, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Red Couch podcast. You know that you can catch up with every episode on our website or wherever you want to listen your podcast, Google, Apple, and if you watch full episode on YouTube, you can see these beautiful faces. And mandatory subscribe to our newsletter to keep up with function. For the Interrobank, and Gracia Espinosa.